right, so welcome everyone. This is the regular select board meeting for Wednesday, March 19th. And we'll call the meeting to order at 5:31. And this meeting is being recorded. Will be available both through BCTV and there will be a recorded record. All right, so first on our agenda, any adjustments to the agenda, Karen?
Yeah, I'm going to recommend, well, I'd like to add executive session under Title I, VSA 313A3, employee matter.
Okay, sounds good. We'll just do that in the listed executive session. So we then have approval of minutes of May 5th and 6th.
Make a motion to approve the minutes May 5th and May 6th, 2021.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of May 5th and 6th as presented. And if there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, warrants to the treasurer. So we have two warrants, a payroll warrant and an AP warrant. And if somebody wants to make a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve and execute the warrants to the treasurer as presented upon completion of review.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes upon completion of, or the warrants upon completion of review. So Karen, if you want to go ahead and review them, that would be great.
Sure. So payroll warrant dated May 21st, 2021 in the amount of $18,577.14. So the only difference here, we have a new employee for the fire department. Glenn Merrill just started.
Good. We don't have to do anything about that. You're just pointing that out as it's a different name on the warrant.
Yeah, it's another new employee.
Okay.
Good. Okay. So the AP warrant.
Accounts payable dated May 8th through May 21st, 2021 in the amount of $59,980.50.
Who's Independent Landscape and what did they
I'm
do?
on the wrong one.
Independent landscapers are the new mowing,
Oh, right. Thank you. Yep.
landscaping, and there's various invoices in here. They've done town hall and the library landscaping, and they've been in the cemeteries already.
Thanks.
So far, so good.
Yeah, John, I'm having John Johnson look at the cemeteries after mowing to make sure everything looks good. With Memorial Day coming up and flags going out in the cemeteries, we're making sure we look at things this year. And town hall looks good. Library, Emily's working with the new company, so.
And what is USA Blue Book? I think
That,
Blue Book is valuing for vehicles, but.
no, that's for wastewater.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And what's power plant, Karen?
Power plant is like a, it's Nortrax.
Okay, got it.
So whenever we need anything or we have service on our equipment, so it gets charged and then we just pay it. And this is work that was done on the backhoe.
Okay.
And tarp cover, what did we get a canopy for?
That would be the library, and they're going to get a grant for reimbursement on that.
Nice.
So it's for outside, and the library notified me too, like June 21st is going to be they're going to open, but it's going to have limitations.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll get the word out to us and to the public.
So that'll be for like an outdoor space for them.
That is an outdoor space, Eileen, yes.
Okay, cool.
Okay. I'm good.
And
Okay.
works on paper is related to the documentation of stuff on the town clerk. What is works on paper? On it, Karen.
Works on paper is, yes. So it's restoration.
Okay, that's what I assumed. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, good. So it has been moved and seconded to approve the warrants as presented upon completion of review. We have now completed a review. If there are no further questions or comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, good. Thank you. Okay. Next, we move on to public comment on items not on the agenda. Are there any public comments that people would like to make? Not seeing anything in the chat, and I'm not hearing anybody speaking up. So if not, we will move on to select board items for discussion and action. So first on that would be the Pool Revitalization Fund resolution review and approval. And we have a resolution related to that in our packet.
That's correct.
And I just, before we go on to that, because I don't think we have it in here, I just want to point out we got a very nice thank you letter from Putney Community Cares for the allocation to them for the social services from Denise Barnett, VP over there. So nice keeping that money working hard, I'm sure. So if somebody would like to move to pass the resolution creating a well, why don't I go ahead and read it, or does somebody want to read it? I'm happy to if nobody else wants to. So it's a resolution creating a special revenue fund to account for donations received and their associated expenditures. In the year 2021, resolved by the Select Board of the Town of Putney as follows. Whereas governmental accounting standards allow a municipality to use a special revenue fund to report the proceeds of special sources that are restricted or committed to expenditures for a specific purpose, and whereas the Town of Putney currently operates a number of special revenue funds which allows us to report revenue sources and their designated expenditures, utilities, library fundraising fund, the library fundraising fund, and public safety reimbursement fund, and whereas the Town of Putney shall use the public pool fundraising donations received for the purpose of revitalizing the public pool, and whereas maintaining a special revenue fund for these donations allows the funds to be carried forward into future years until spent. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Putney Select Board approves the creation of a special revenue donations fund. This fund shall be used for donations pool fundraising and shall be recorded in the Pool Revitalization Fund, adopted this day, 19th day of May, 2021 at Putney, Windham County, Vermont. So I will make that as a motion.
And
I'll
I'll second.
second. I'll third.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments relating to this? The purpose of this, just so people know, is that we, in receiving monies as donations, it's in everybody's best interest to have it specifically allocated so that there's no confusion as to what that money is to be spent on. And so forming this fund allows us to have a vehicle to do that. And it then does not just end up in the larger general fund. It ends up in a reserve fund specific to the pool. So, and also, again, pool fundraising has been great. Thank you, everyone who has been part of that. And also, we'll talk more about some of the bids we received and some of the work we're thinking about doing. It seems like some things are going to be a little less expensive than we might have anticipated. And that's actually great because it's going to allow us to do hopefully a bunch of other things that need to be done at the pool anyway. So, so that's where we'll talk a little bit more about that. So it's been moved and seconded to approve a resolution to create a special revenue fund to account for donations received and their associated expenditures. If there's no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Good, thank you. So Karen, then we have pool status update. So do you want to go right into that?
Sure. So we're approximately $60,000 that we have raised thus far for the pool. And our requests for bids to repair the pool are due this Friday. So if I was on top of it, I should have had them due last Friday and we'd be probably making a decision tonight. But so far we only have one bid, but it's okay. We'll, you know, it's been out there. We'll see what happens. We've been coordinating with Ruby and Beverly and Katie Iman regarding swim lessons, lifeguards, and just getting general information out to the public. I know everyone is waiting to see, they're waiting for a date when the pool might open. David and I and Joe all went to the pool and did a site visit, and we made a list, which is in your packet as well, of various things that will need to be done up there. They don't all need to be done, you know, prior to opening, but there are some things like stripping the floors and repainting, cleaning the deck area, you know, a brush and leaves. And so perhaps we can have a work group, maybe the first weekend of June or the second weekend, and just have a bunch of people up there and just go through the building, get it cleaned up and ready. June 2nd, we'll know more about a contractor to do the work. I'm optimistic that it'll get done so we can open, but
I also, just so the two of you know, I told Karen the bid opening is on Friday. And if there's a reason, you know, we don't want to miss an opportunity with a contractor to get this work done as soon as possible. So I suggested that if we needed to, we could probably have a very brief special meeting to approve a bid if it's obvious sort of how we want to proceed. You know, we're still, as we've talked about before, we're still looking at bids that might be hard to compare apples to apples. So, you know, depending on what we get in for bids, if we get more bids in, we may end up having to spend some time figuring that out, or it may be obvious. But if we need to, maybe early next week, we can have just sort of a 5 or 10 minute meeting to catch up on that. So, good. All right. Anything else on pool status? Just so you know, Eileen, you may already know this, but Beverly, who Karen mentioned, is the woman who manages the pool for us. She manages all the lifeguards, et cetera. And
I think I've met her
probably
when we've been there. Yeah.
been and out she's been a regular with us for probably 3 years now, at least. And she's at the pool some of the time. So, all right, reserve fund policy, highway department, review and approval.
so in your packet, because we created the highway reserve fund in March when the voters voted on the article for town meeting. I've been consulting with the LCT and I have not come across any documentation about previous reserve funds. And I think it's important that.
Sorry, Karen, previous reserve funds for us?
Yeah, like, so we have one in the general fund, right?
Yeah.
We have the sidewalk reserve fund, we have the roof reserve fund.
Yeah.
But it doesn't outline what the money is specifically for. You know, we kind of know, but, you know, 5 years down the road, if, you know, I'm not here or, you know, select board changes, you know, there's nothing in writing. It's very difficult to just assume what that money is for. So I think it needs to be outlined, and the reserve fund policy, when I created it for the highway department, so basically it's the article that was voted on, but in the third paragraph, and we discussed this, the very last sentence in the third paragraph. So in accordance with 24 VSA 2804A, expenditure of the reserve funds for any other purpose shall require the authorization of a majority of the voters present at an annual or special town meeting. And we had that conversation over and over, and we went back and forth and went back and forth. But, you know, having it on paper, knowing what the purpose of that reserve fund is specifically for and what the board is allowed to do with it and when they can, you know, allocate or spend money, or is it up to the voters? You know, it's right here on paper, and it makes it clearer. And then we're not sitting around saying, you know, can we do this or can't we do this?
So Karen, are there other funds like the sidewalk fund or yeah, the sidewalk reserve fund? We do have one still, don't we? Are there other funds like this that would benefit from
Well,
making it clear?
it's a good question, Eileen, because I think at one time, and I'm trying to research this right now, and Emily and I have talked about it, but it was before her time too. I found in, I think it was an old town report, and it might have been when the library was being built, there was a library reserve fund. So it's not active, but it's like I can't find any documentation on it, you know? Was it specific for the library, you know, to build the library? Is it still, you know, I know there's no money in it because I would have seen that by now, but it's not clear.
Well, it seems interesting. It's kind of the VLCT model reserve fund policy guidance, the last line. Once created, it falls under the control and direction of the select board. But it also says in the next paragraph that it has to be specifically stated what the money can be spent on.
Correct.
So it doesn't seem like we have a lot of leeway there. We can choose to not spend it. Is that what we can do? But we can't choose to spend it on something other than the guideline.
Correct. So it's kind of like, remember we had that phase 3 money from the sidewalk?
Mm-hmm.
So it was specific for the landmark third phase, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the select board could not move that money on their own. It had to be the voters. So that's kind of where we're going with these reserve policies. So it outlines for this specific one for the highway, it outlines it's for, you know, highway improvements, buildings, repair and maintenance of roads, et cetera, et cetera. So basically the language came from the article that was voted on in March.
So it seems on the highway department, that's pretty straightforward and probably not very problematic. But if we had a reserve fund for the general fund, we might want to have a little more leeway to be able to do different things with that money if we needed to. And so,
and here's the thing,
how do we word that?
Right. So I don't know, because the general fund reserve fund is already created. And I know there's a town hall line item in there. So there's money for town hall improvements.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know when that was created. I have no backup documentation. I'm sure maybe it
ballpark 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
We'd have to go back through the minutes of all the town reports.
Yeah, we created it. and started in the beginning, I think we allocated 25,000 a year to it. And we spent that for a number of years doing insulation and work in the basement, pour to slab, so on and so forth. And also used it for matching funds for grant stuff. We had Sevka do a bunch of work that was a matching fund thing. We've done grades of electrical, so on and so forth. But the intention was essentially, you know, we have, I don't know whether you've ever even seen this, Karen, we have a proposed oh, well, you probably have through the Historical Society, the proposed complete renovation of Town Hall. And at the time that that was done, which must have been, that proposal was created, which must have been 2010, 2012, somewhere in that range, maybe. It was about a $600,000 project. And we, the select board that was sitting at that time, there wasn't a lot of grant money available. There wasn't a specific need for that. So what we decided to do instead was to allocate 25,000 a year and take as much of the low-hanging fruit as we could and get it knocked off, so that we weren't, you know, particularly focused on weatherization, damp proofing. You know, we did some structural work in the basement to look, if people remember, the stairs in the front hall used to be very crooked. We had Chris Parker do a bunch of jack work down in the basement and reset posts and stuff like that. So, you know, over the years we've been doing that, and we should keep doing that. But now that we potentially are going to have the Historical Society involved as well, you know, we should work with them on what would be beneficial to them as well.
Yeah.
So, but David, I think the answer in part to your question is, and I might be wrong about this, but if there's a reserve fund in the general fund that is a general fund reserve fund, then I think we have the authority to essentially spend it as we choose. Is that not the case, Karen? I mean, it's hard reading through this. I understand what you're saying. It doesn't necessarily feel that way.
No, it doesn't. The VLCT model seems like, this applies to the highway fund and the general fund, and it seems like it's pretty specific, and the language needs to be pretty specific, and we can't step outside that. But what was the language around the general fund reserve policy from? Yeah, okay.
I have no idea. I've never come across the document that outlines that.
That predates me, I think, because the fund the fund, which I think you're saying, Karen, falls within, that's a line item within that for Town Hall. We just designated that for Town Hall, and I don't remember creating just a general fund reserve fund, but as Eileen said, we might have to go through the town report minutes to find out when that was voted on. I don't remember that, but it may have been that we did that in order to create the Town Hall reserve fund. I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Right.
This year at town meeting, we established a reserve fund for the general fund, but we didn't have a definition of what the monies would be spent on yet, correct?
Right.
So we can do that next town meeting.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, because that $90-something thousand got dumped into the reserve fund in the general fund, but it's like at that point, so it's in this, you know, holding place. And now you can, you know, if you want to take 25,000, put it in town hall, take 25,000 and delegate it to, you know, the fire station, you know, it's like, but right now it's just sitting there, you know, and it's like.
But that's not that. I mean, we're one of the reasons we did that is because of the advice of our auditor, who, I mean, you know, the reality is we need a reserve fund that's 3 times that size in order to comfortably just have the reserve we want. So I don't think we should be, I mean, not that we shouldn't do things if we need to, but I don't think we should be looking to spend that reserve fund down.
No, that's, yeah.
We need to. Let's keep that as our rainy day fund kind of thing.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, his advice also was that that money needs to be there for expenditures daily expenditures if we need to. So it needs to be unrestricted to a large degree.
Right.
And so we need to be careful about language we put on any reserve fund for the general fund that might keep us from being able to use it for whatever we need to use it for. So just a thought.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
this is an excellent discussion, and I would like to add to it that reserve funds actually are defined by Vermont statute, 1 VSA section 2804A, which is very brief, so I'll read it. At an annual or special meeting duly warned, a municipality may establish a reserve fund to be under the control and direction of the legislative branch of the municipality. This reserve fund shall be kept in a separate account and invested as are other public funds, and may be expended for such purposes for which established, or when authorized by a majority of the voters present and voting at an annual or special meeting duly warned, for other purposes. That's the end.
So, yeah, okay. I'd have to, that seems typically vague, but very defined, but vague in typical Vermont statute. Open to interpretation. So I think we'd need to spend some time with that. The only thing I heard in there that I wouldn't have thought necessarily was the case, and may be inherently the case because we may have it in a sweep account, but that it should be invested. So we don't want it just, in theory, just sitting around. It should be essentially managed money from the sounds of that.
Well, this is true, sir, except it says invested as are other public funds. In other words, it wouldn't be distinct from any other money the town of Putney has and may perhaps put somewhere so it earns a bit of interest or whatever while it's waiting.
Right. Okay. So that would be the sweep account. Basically.
Yes, it is a sweep. Yep.
It says separate account, separate account. What was that?
We don't have separate accounts, David. So everything's in one account. We have the checking account and then we have the sweep account. So the checking account has a daily number. And then if it goes over, all that extra money goes into the sweep account.
So my question, the thought I have is that language in the statute so that it can be accounted separately from everything else in the general fund at any time? What's the reason for that language in the statute? I don't understand that.
Well, I think the reason is so that it doesn't just get mixed into the general fund, general spending. I think you need to keep it as a defined account and keep track of how much is in it.
Right.
So that it, otherwise it would.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So basically the surplus that came out of the highway department, right?
Created that, right.
Yes, that created that. So every year if there's surplus, you can take it and put it in that reserve fund and it's restricted for the highway department, right? So. And you cannot, David, you cannot take the highway money and put it in general fund. Doesn't work that way.
But, and as we all know, we have more leeway with highway money than we do typically with general fund money. But I think what I'm hearing from this is that this is good money for us to have set aside, and we shouldn't go looking to spend it unless we need to, but we should feel we can if we need to. But I would also say before town meeting next year, we should really look at this information that we have and the statute and make sure that we have given whoever the sitting select board might be the freedom to do with that money what they might need to, and haven't tied their hands by how it was designated. So that we could both seek counsel from our counsel, from VLCT, and or from the auditor. I'm sure the auditor would be familiar with that as well. So but just to sure that's well kept track of. Yes, Mr. Fairman.
I would add one qualification to that, or I would suggest a qualification, and that is the select board does not actually have the authority that you mentioned. at an annual or special meeting duly warned, the fund is established, and at an annual or special meeting, any change to the purpose of any expenditure that is not for the stated purpose of the fund has to be approved by a majority of the town meeting voters present and voting.
Right.
So in that sense, a reserve fund is really not deciding what to spend the money from the reserve fund on is not at select board discretion. It is established by the voters present and voting at town meeting. Now, whether to spend a specific amount of that money on at a specific time, of course, would be the select board's decision. You know, we have a reserve fund for the highway, and we decided, I don't know, we need to buy a loader.
Right.
Okay, you know, obviously.
So,
Yeah,
question,
go ahead, David.
do we have to recreate this reserve every year? I was reading this last night, late at night, and it seemed like the language on the statute was that we have to recreate this reserve fund every year and restate its purpose every year.
So what the select board's supposed to do every year, right after town meeting, is review all of their policies and ordinances, period.
I'm glad we've done that, so we can move on.
It's not like this has to be an article every year for a town meeting.
No,
We established it, and then we review it as a select board, but we don't bring it to the voters again next town meeting.
No, I think the larger point is that when we create the warrants, in whenever that is, December, that we just want to make sure that the wording is broad enough or it does what we intend it to do, so that when the voters move it up or down, we're not tying our hands.
Exactly. No, because I was just looking, I have a whole slew of town reports here, but not the one for the current year. But I can't remember what the language was for the vote, but there is some language in there for, you know, we put this aside for as a reserve fund for the purpose of X, Y, and Z. So I think that, yeah, Karen, go ahead.
So your article is right in the third paragraph, because I
Yes.
copied it verbatim.
Yeah.
Paragraph.
So I like this idea going forward, because it would be tedious to go back through 20 years worth of minutes to figure out what a fund is supposed to do.
Yeah.
So Karen, sorry, where are you saying that is?
Third paragraph.
The highway?
The reserve fund was established by the voters for the purpose of purchase or lease of highway equipment, construction and/or improvements of highway buildings, repair and maintenance of roads and bridges.
Right, but I'm talking about the general fund, reserve fund.
Oh, I don't know anything.
We don't know that one.
Right, that's the one that I'm wondering.
That's
So, because to Mr. Fairman's point, you know, if it was voted that a general fund, reserve fund was established in order to, for example, you know, expend money on accounts or on buildings as necessary, on, you know, municipal infrastructure, so on and so forth, then we have the authority to do that. So we just need to clarify that.
Correct.
So that's what we need to find out. Alyssa, you got something to add?
Do you have any idea of what year that general fund might be? Because I have all the town reports in my office.
No. I mean, we were talking about whether it was established at the same time that we established the fund for town hall, which I'm guessing was around 2010, but I have no idea. But it's not something we need to know right now. I just think, you know, we should find the verbiage that was used. We may have, I don't know. I mean, the budget, the easiest way to do it probably would be to look in the budgets in town reports to go back and see when the reserve fund started being a reserve fund. It may go way back. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll figure that out later.
Yeah. But that's what I was saying about before town meeting next year, is that we should make sure of that, because if we want it to be, if the language is outdated or too restrictive, we should ask the voters to change.
Which article was it? Do you remember? I got the articles if you want to read it.
From when?
Which one you talking about, David?
Oh, were we talking about the one we established last year?
No, we're talking about one that was established in like 2010, 2009, something like that.
Or maybe way before that. I have no idea. I
Right.
don't remember.
Mr.
All
Chairman?
right. Yes, Mr. Fairman.
2 points. First, you mentioned that statutes are typically vague. Actually, statutes are very carefully written to be extremely precise. And when there is any debate about this winds up before a Supreme Court. But to clarify, 24 VSA section 2804 itself, I'm now going to read a brief paragraph from the VLCT Model Reserve Fund Policy Guidance. This is the first paragraph. A reserve fund is a separate, dedicated financial account that is created to fund a specific municipal purpose whose balance is carried over from year to year. Reserve funds are created by approval from a majority of voters at an annual or special town meeting. A reserve fund can be created for any legitimate municipal purpose. Once created, it falls under the control and direction of the select board, end of quote.
Right. So the question is what the verbiage was that was used when our general fund reserve fund was created, because we don't have that in front of us at the moment. No, and I would agree, I think the interesting thing about Vermont statute is that it tends to be, you're right, it's very well defined, but they also tend to be open to interpretation. And as you accurately pointed out, where that then goes is to the judicial system to figure that out when it's a question. So, but as we know, these things, they get tested over and over again. So, but yeah, we just need to find the language for what ours was called when we did it, or what the select board's leeway was in how to spend that money. So, all right. So, are you looking for us to approve this tonight, Karen? What?
Are you comfortable doing that, or do you want to
This is, so you're looking, I mean, which are you looking, the VLC?
This is the highway department reserve. It's titled Reserve Fund Policy. The only change I would make to this, Karen, is to say highway in the title,
Okay.
because it makes it sound like it's very general to all reserve fund policies.
I can do that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'm comfortable approving it.
Yeah, it seems like it's what we talked about last fall and quite a
Right.
bit.
Sorry, I was looking further up at the VLCT model one, and okay, yeah, no, I think this is fine, but I would agree with Eileen that we should label it Highway Reserve Fund Policy.
Sure, we can make that change, not a problem.
So I would entertain a motion to approve the Reserve Fund Policy as presented, with the change to the title being made to call it the Highway Reserve Fund Policy.
So moved.
A second.
Right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the Highway Reserve Fund Policy for the town of Putney as presented, with one correction. Is there any further discussion or any further questions?
No.
If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Internal control and financial management procedures and review and approval. Procedures manual review and approval.
So I just want to comment that I don't expect approval of this tonight. Alyssa and I had a small conversation this afternoon, and we did make some changes on this draft. I just want to warn the select board too that there are going to be more policies coming in the future for review. This particular procedures manual was recommended by our auditor like a couple years ago. So Alyssa and I worked together. She did the bulk of the work pulling this together, and then we tweaked it a little bit. So
I'm sorry, Karen, I missed that. You said that this was What did you say about it? This was brought to us by our auditor?
Yeah, like a couple years back.
So this was John Mudgett who,
So,
so
Yeah.
this is sort of a boilerplate from him. I'm not remembering that, but.
Yeah, so this is not a boilerplate from John Mudgett, but this we took from VLCT as well.
Okay,
And we worked with them. They recommended, this was their template, and we just adapted our procedures into this. And our new auditor too also stated that we should have some sort of procedures. And it makes
Okay.
sense. The other thing too I did with this, Josh, Windham Regional Commission had one that was similar. So of course they're a different entity and theirs was a little bit different, but I read this word for word, page to page, and I'm comfortable with it. The only change I want to bring to your attention on page 5, procurement guidelines. So right now in the draft, we started off procurement of goods and services under 2,500, sound business practices, calls to trusted suppliers, review of catalogs, websites, etc. We want to put that number up to 5,000.
I was going to say that seemed awfully small.
Yeah, because what that does, Eileen, it changes the other lines. And if we have to be putting bids out for something for $2,500, it doesn't make sense.
yeah, I don't know. We've historically sort of based that on 5,000 or more, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure, I'm
Yep.
not sure where that number came from, if it didn't come from our own guidelines, but that's what I've always thought was our cutoff number, was 5.
Yep. So the next line, procurement of goods and services, we're going to change that number to reflect 5,000 to 10,000. And then solicit 3 estimates. And then the next line is okay. So the other thing too is the town manager should be notified of any planned purchases over $2,500. And Brian and Tom are pretty good, but yeah, anything over 5 should be like, we should be seeking bids.
Yeah.
And they do that. They do that anyway. So
Yeah, I kind of, yeah, I make sure they try, do that because it's important. Yeah, no, it's like when I'm aware, David, okay, when I'm aware of it. The other thing, we made some changes on page 7 and 8 for retention of records. And Alyssa's gotten her head around this only because we've been going through all of the boxes at town hall, because there's a lot of stuff that we didn't need to keep, and so we're slowly going through things, and as we go through them, we're developing the procedures and the manuals and the policies, to cover ourselves.
So you're coming up with retention policies for all the different documents?
Correct.
Cool.
Yep.
I know that's really needed, and I know it's also very tedious and
Right.
it can be nerve-wracking at times.
It's probably largely prescribed by both the state and the IRS, I would think, isn't it?
It's pretty well defined, but
Yeah.
You always come across documents that you're not entirely sure whether they fall under one category or the other.
Yeah.
And the default is, if you're not sure, then keep it. But then you end up with piles and piles and piles of paper. So it's good to go through those policies from time to time.
Yeah, the other thing that's good, and as much as you can do this, and I think we do it pretty well, but label things appropriately so that somebody doesn't have to then go back through boxes to know what we have to keep and what we, I mean, if it's labeled whatever, tax information from 2010 can be disposed of in, 20XY,
Right.
that helps somebody in the future from having to paw through everything saying, oh boy, what was this?
Right.
So what's the feeling of the board? I would be tempted to sit on this till next meeting, have Karen make the changes, give us
Yeah.
all a little bit longer. The other question, Karen, and I don't know whether we need to do this or not, is should this be vetted by Larry?
This came through VLCT again, so.
No, it's pretty good. Okay.
Yes.
The one other thing I will say about it, and one of the discussions in equity and inclusion is that the state is now recommending that virtually everything is looked at through an equity impact assessment document. And so I just received the state copy of that, and I'll just have a peek at comparing the two and see whether that applies to this. I just got it yesterday, so I'm not familiar enough to know whether it really would be applicable to something like this, but I do think that that's something that we have discussed in the subcommittee group currently, that that we should be comparing our procedures to see how they compare with state impact assessment stuff. So I'll have a look at that, and if it looks to me like we need to do more work on that, then I'll see what's involved. But
Right.
I just don't know whether any of it would even apply to this.
Yeah. So one other comment I want to make. So this procedures manual too has checks and balances. So the finance director, treasurer, administrative assistant / administrative treasurer or assistant treasurer, excuse me. The checks and balances are in here, and this will be vetted through the auditor as well. And I expect as we, grow and things change, this policy right here will probably change, and, we'll have to make revisions to it. But now we have something on paper because we never had this.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah, I can wait until June 2nd and I'll clean it up.
Okay, so next would be the COVID-19 mask resolution discussion.
I added that to your packets. There was a request from one of the board members, and with the CDC and the state making changes with masks, we do have this resolution in place. We can have a discussion about it. My feeling is because this resolution is in place, if you're going to change it or ratify it or, do away with it, you need to make that decision. And I want to remind the board too that we put this resolution together to support businesses in town when COVID first started. But I don't know if you want to get a census from the businesses, how they feel about, not wearing masks or,
I would also, I don't know exactly. Tom's away this week, I know, but it might be worth asking Tom and comparing it to the current state guidelines, because I know I've listened to some of the governor's discussion in the last two, and even at the state level, they're sort of saying, well, we're trying to figure out how the state should respond to the CDC recommendations, et cetera, et cetera. So, I guess my feeling about this is that this is unrestrictive enough so that we are not mandating mask wearing in this resolution. We are making recommendations, and if people and businesses choose to do differently, there are certainly not enforceable consequences, if there are consequences at all, and there aren't really consequences based on this. So I don't feel the need to change this right now. I think that when the time comes that the state, the emergency order is rescinded or some other, sort of dramatic change in how the state is looking at it, then we should certainly revisit it. But Vanessa, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, can you say what the change is? What is it that we're talking about?
Sorry, Eileen, hang on. Let me see what Eileen's saying, and then I'll go from there.
Yeah, so it was, I guess, whatever day that was that the governor rescinded the statewide mask mandate. There was confusion among a bunch of different businesses and clientele, and some anger and some, now we're ignoring all the CDC guidelines, et cetera, things like that. And almost immediately signs started going up in local businesses saying, we still require masks, we get it. So I felt like it was sort of bringing us back to before we started encouraging mask use, to really put it on the businesses. And I just felt maybe if the board was in agreement that we reaffirmed that we think businesses in general have the authority and the or we encourage them to maintain their policies.
So
that's where it came up. I wasn't looking to change anything. I just thought maybe we needed to discuss it publicly to reaffirm that.
No, I think that's a good idea. And Vanessa, where the change would be is that we could resolve to no longer have this emergency order for the town of Putney. But the reality is the way this is written was to encourage, not to mandate. And so I think I'm perfectly comfortable doing what Eileen said of keeping this in place. I mean, I think we could just verbally say, this is what we're doing. We're staying with this for the time being because it is not a requirement. It is a recommendation. And if and when the state changes that to a further degree, then we can revisit that. But I don't see any need for us to overturn this resolution because I don't think it's restrictive enough for that to be an issue. David?
I feel exactly the same. I think we were really careful about how we worded this. I think it supported people and it didn't force anybody into a position they didn't want to be in. We encouraged and supported. And I think at the time there was desire to make it a mandate, and I think it was good that we didn't make it a mandate. Yeah. And I think that way it can stay in place right now, and it's just fine.
And I think, certainly the discussions in the governor's discussions are, we're not asking people or telling people they need to change what they're doing. We're just saying that if there are those who really feel the need to or the desire to, they have that opportunity. And I think that this resolution maintains that. They have the opportunity to enforce it if they choose to. And if they choose not to, that's up to them. So, yeah, David.
Because I've had the busiest week you can imagine. What did the governor come out? They repealed the mandate, the mask. Get me up to speed.
Well, I don't know the exact language, Eileen. I don't know whether you do, but essentially it's following the CDC guidelines, which allows for fully vaccinated people to not have to wear masks in many circumstances. It's not across the board, and they dramatically shift yet the occupancy of restaurants and places of business, et cetera. But it's sort of, I mean, as the governor has said a number of times, it's a sort of a turn of the spigot kind of thing. And so I think it was recognizing that the CDC had shifted their position on this and that the state was receptive to that, but not saying, hey, have at it, do whatever you want. So,
and they also made it clear that local mandates and business mandates could remain in place. So, so the town of Brattleboro still has a mask mandate. They went that far, and the local businesses in our town still have their own policies, and I saw additional signs coming up, and I was like, okay.
Yeah. And they have the option to enforce those as they choose.
Right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
It happens, well, first, the governor's Tuesday and Friday morning news conferences about this matter are live streamed on WCAX. So I was watching when he spoke about the masking. And of course, this is, as I understood it, naturally, but that it is, you folks between you have correctly stated what the governor said. I'll just add one point. He said the exception is everyone is required to wear a mask within healthcare and group home facilities.
Yeah.
But other than that, fully vaccinated people do not have to mask anymore. But yes, indeed, businesses have full discretion because he used different words, but in effect, it's private property, and they can choose.
Yes. Yeah.
So are you fully vaccinated once you've shot, or does it take 2 weeks after you've had your
2
shot?
weeks after your second shot,
Right.
or 2 weeks after your only Johnson & Johnson shot, if you got Johnson & Johnson. Vanessa?
So, yeah, and I think just to clarify what Mr. Fairman just said, also public transportation. So medical facilities, airports, other public transportation.
Yep.
And obviously this is not a time that we'd be going back and creating a mandate, but I think the main issue is that it puts businesses into such a difficult situation where, you know, people are now just coming in without masks on. There's no way, you know, to know who actually is vaccinated. You don't want to ask for, you know, passports. And it really becomes kind of a labor issue and a safety issue and a respect for your, you know, for local businesses and business owners. So as I think, I can't remember who just said it, you know, really, to the degree we can check in with the local businesses and figure out how best to support them.
Yeah.
So that they don't have all of this extra, you know, who knows what's what and who has to wear a mask and who doesn't. And then they're getting all this pushback when people don't want to have to. And so just however we can support the local businesses.
Yeah, and that
looks like, but
as David said before, that was our thinking when we crafted this resolution in the first place, was we didn't want to mandate it, but it was very similar minus the vaccination aspect, which obviously changes the equation. But we were at a point, whenever it was, a year and a little bit ago, where nobody really knew what we actually should be doing. So we created this resolution with the intent of saying businesses can make that choice, and if they choose to restrict entrance, then that's up to them, and that's okay. So I think that would still stand. But I agree with you. I mean, I think that and out of due respect to people, for all of us to keep a mask on for a little bit longer feels like not that much of a burden at this point.
no, not at all.
But that's a personal opinion, not a mandate. So I mean, I'm more than happy not to wear mine, but I am wearing it when I go into stores and stuff, exactly for the reason you're stating. It's just I don't need it to be more controversial than it wants to be.
But just a fun comment, just to add levity. Not long ago, if somebody had pulled up in front of your store and slipped a mask on, you would have been worried about them.
What are they about to spread in my store? Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It'll be interesting. I mean, there's been lots of discussion about this, but it'll be interesting to see how long it takes for people. There are people who are saying, I'm going to keep doing this for 5 years, and it's like,
Right.
have
I
at it.
haven't been sick for a year. It's been great.
Exactly. So.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to leave this order as it stands, this resolution as it stands for the time being, and reconsider it if and when the state stuff that comes out, and or just when the sort of general atmosphere feels more settled. So, all right.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a communication venue, something in place that includes all of, your local businesses that you guys just can.
Sorry,
like
you
a,
were breaking,
sorry,
breaking up a little bit, Vanessa. Sorry, could you just repeat that?
Is there a group email or some communication base that you guys have to communicate with local businesses?
No.
That you could do, like a quick check-in, say, hey, here's the governor's thing. Do we have feedback?
So we have links on our website,
Yeah.
to the PDC and the governor's website. So at this,
I would guess that Putney Mutual Aid is probably sort of reasonably playing that role, and I might be wrong about that. I don't know.
right.
And what the overlap, there also, I mean, there is a community business group, and I don't know how organized they've been of late. But I think between those two, that's probably where most of that falls.
Okay. Just curious. Thanks.
And one comment, Josh, I wanted to make, I think for June 2nd, I will have Tom as the emergency management director update the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe just specifically ask him, since he's not part of the discussion tonight, to just take a peek at that resolution and see whether he feels we should be doing anything different with it. I'm guessing the answer is no, but all right, town manager's report. That would be you, Karen.
Okay. So I want to report illegal dumping on Sand Hill Road and Westminster Road. I'm very disappointed. We just got Sand Hill, the parking area, cleaned up. Somebody had dumped like an old chair or couch down there, but there was that burn pile too, from all the branches that the highway department had cut down. So I had the highway department, I spoke to Brian, he had the highway crew clean it up. And a few days after, somebody went in there and dumped tree stumps and some soil and invasive plants. And I'm very, very, very disappointed. I'm just beside myself that somebody has done that. The second site is at the Westminster Putney town line on Westminster Road. So there's a pull off there too. And I got a phone call earlier this week that there was a bunch of stuff there. So I notified Brian. We could put no dumping signs, but without enforcement, and unless we catch them doing it, it's very difficult to process anyone.
We probably should put no dumping signs, just because then we can say, well, if it wasn't already obvious, it should have been. And you're right, enforcement is tough, but for example, if I happened to be driving by and saw somebody dumping stuff there, but there wasn't a no dumping sign, somebody could probably reasonably argue, I didn't know I couldn't dump stuff here. Again, seemingly pretty obvious, but we probably ought to put no dumping signs, I would guess, just so that if we need to enforce, we have something to fall back on. I don't know.
So
Anyway, I just want, go ahead, Karen, you go, because it seems like you're, and I'll go
well,
after.
what I wanted to report was that I did notify the sheriff's department about the dumping on Sand Hill.
Good.
Because that is protected wetlands.
Yeah.
And the Conservation Commission and Wilson Wetlands Committee are trying to clean that area up, and they're going to put some fence posts, so people can park but not go into the area where it's wet. And they're also going to be erecting a kiosk down there. So they're doing a lot of work, to protect. And I also believe that Rebecca Chalmers has been notified, and if this person gets caught, they will probably be prosecuted.
That's the state person. That's A&R. Yeah.
She's the wetlands environmental person.
Yeah. Eileen.
Yeah, so I know about the kiosk and the posts that they're planning on putting up. It occurs to me that there's no sign there specifically that says it's part of the wetland complex. I know there's signs earlier down the road, but I don't think there's anything there.
There will be once the kiosk gets
They're
up.
gonna put that on there too. Okay.
Yeah, so they already have some signage, and then we're gonna put some more out there, and yeah.
So
David.
the comment I wanted to make was sort of related to this, and I've noticed in the last couple of years, and I don't know what's causing this trend, but people bringing their stuff and leaving it on the side of the road with a sign that says free. And I
Right.
can tell you, it sure seems like something that I would never do. If it's my junk and I don't want it anymore, I have a yard sale or I deal with it. And I deal with it on my land. And this is just my opinion, but I find that troubling. And so even though this is different, and it isn't all that different. And I think that there, I don't know if there's a way we can get a message out there that, that burdens everybody, because then somebody has to go. If nobody finds it a valuable treasure and takes it away, somebody else has to go in and clean up your mess. And
Well, somebody else, meaning the town, because Fort Hill and Route 5 and Putney Mountain Road.
yeah, Putney Mountain Road, I've seen a bunch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happens is that I have to contact Brian. They go out, clean it up. It goes to the dump, and the taxpayers are paying for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's that.
I mean, I totally agree with your sentiment, David. I find it really frustrating. And I also would encourage just homeowners, if you put something out that you think is a decent thing that somebody might want and you put a free sign on it, great. But if it sits there for 2 weeks and just turns into garbage, please
Pick it up.
because it just looks dumpy. But I agree. I particularly noticed it with Putney Mountain Road as well. I mean, Johnson's Curve, but that's Dummerston, so that's not our purview. But
Right.
it might be worth. We were talking about signs at Sand Hill and at the reality is, and I've often thought about this, like at the bottom of Putney Mountain. I know some of it's well intended, and some of it clearly is not so well intended. But the reality is that it's illegal dumping. And
Right.
I think we probably should invest in signs that say that. Again, one, because it would give us some teeth to enforce if we chose to. But two, if people really had something to remind them of that, they might think twice about it. I don't know. I might be projecting altruism that isn't there. But, I think those might be signs that are worth putting, and find out from the state, what our ability. I mean, maybe it's just local ordinance, but it might be state. I mean, I know on Route 5 up by Pine Banks Road, there's a no illegal dumping and there's a fine amount, and I can't remember what it is, but maybe we should decide that we have a fine and that's what it is. And I would imagine that would discourage some people.
I have to say another comment about this. In the age of the internet, if you have something that's valuable and you want to give it away, man, it is not that hard to post something somewhere.
No.
It's not that hard. It's what is it, Brattleboro free? I mean,
Yeah.
what is
Right,
that?
right.
I've done so much stuff on that site. It's the stuff that I see there
Is garbage.
doesn't seem that valuable to me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've had people take stuff through Facebook posts or things that that I wouldn't have taken myself, but they take them.
Yep. No, and that's great. I mean, the flip side of this discussion, I think, is we all, I think, would agree with the fact that we should reduce, reuse, recycle as much as we can. So as much as we can cycle those things around for another use, great, let's do it. But let's not use the side of the roads to have that happen, especially if it's not your own property.
Yeah.
Doesn't Westminster and there's the site where you can recycle, they have a Saturday morning
Transfer station, yeah.
transfer station. They have a venue for this. There must be other venues for this.
Wyndham Solid Waste has one too.
Yeah, it's just that you have to actually haul it all the way over there, and so that's problematic, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I mean, I take that, you're right. There's the swap at Windham Solid Waste. And, you know, I don't think it's been functioning at all for the last year or so. I'm hopeful that it's up and going again, and it may well be. I don't know, but because of COVID, it wasn't. But it's a tremendous resource. And as Eileen said, you know, I mean, I take stuff there regularly, and I'm just amazed. They're like, oh yeah, we'll take that. And it's like, great. I don't have to throw it away, you know, and somebody wants it. It's perfect, you know.
I also know that there's independents out there, and I know this because my aunt and uncle moved to assisted living recently, and I helped my cousins clean out their house. And there are people you can call who will come and take the stuff you don't want practically for free. And they really want it because they have sites like these at their home where people will come in and buy your used coffee maker for $5 and be glad to get it, or whatever. And, you know, we made the call, and the guy was there the next morning and loaded his van 3 times, like filled it. So I don't know. It bothers me seeing the trash on the side of the road. So
Yeah, it's too bad.
I'll get off the pulpit here. I'll get off the box.
So David, you're the only person I know that's been doing stumping recently. You haven't been taking your truck out to Sand Hill.
No. I'll take all those free plants. We'll put them on my cleared land. Yeah, I'll take them.
Not the invasive.
All your multi-fork roads.
oh really? Yeah, I've got some for you.
No, and I think Karen, you know, to be serious about it, you know, Karen started her disappointment with that. I mean, it's disappointing that anybody would have done something on Sand Hill, but particularly invasives. I mean, you know, it's like the whole idea is not to spread those things around.
Right.
And, you know, somebody may not have known that. It may have been unintentional, but they certainly should have realized that that wasn't a place to dump it. So
That is correct.
all right. So yeah, let's look into signs.
Okay. Tax sale status, I just wanted to update the board. So outstanding is $20,941. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties on the list at this time. One is a probate estate is being opened by Larry's office. I'm working with the bank on one. And the other one, I'm going to contact Windham Windsor Housing Trust and see what we can do because it's in the mobile home park. And if things work out, we may not have a tax sale.
Cool.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, that's very promising. So, you know, $20,000, it's not that bad. There is one still on the list. There is no estate. It's almost $10,000. So that's half of the tax sale list right there. But until an estate is open, there's nothing we can do with the property.
Yeah.
So
That's an incredibly small number for this time of year, considering that we're in COVID. I am so pleased.
Yeah.
you know, I think we did well.
Thank you. That
Yes.
effort, I know, and I thank you for you and Melissa both for working on that.
So the next item is hazard mitigation plan status. So as you know, our plan expired in October. And I spoke to Stephanie at the state in the fall. And I'm like, so this is expired. It's a big process. You know, what can I do? You know, while there's no grant funding, I don't know when there'll be grant funding for this. So usually what happens is municipalities get a grant to update their hazard mitigation plans. And so you have to have public hearings. You get the constituents of the community involved, and you do a draft, and then it gets sent off. So Windham Regional Commission usually helps municipalities, and the grant pays for them to basically do all the work. Now, Dummerston, I saw an ad, a legal notice. They were looking for somebody to help them prepare their hazard mitigation plan. So I spoke to Dummerston, and they have contracted with Windham Regional Commission. They did get a grant, and the costs for Windham Regional Commission to help them with their hazard mitigation plan is $10,112.50. And of that, Dummerston will pay $2,500. So I reached back out to Stephanie at state and said, is there any funding for this, that we can get help to write this plan or revise it? She goes, well, there was funding in January, we awarded municipalities. And I'm like, well, how come I didn't know about it? And it's like, so there was a miscommunication between Stephanie and I, because in the fall I said, well, I'll try to draft it and revise it. So at that point, she thought I was going to do the whole thing. And then Windham Regional should have reached out to us as well. So unfortunately, we missed the funding again. So I'm going to have to make an attempt to get this plan revised, go through our public hearings. Westminster right now is doing the process. So I'm going to follow Russ a little bit and see how he has his public hearings, what he's doing, who's involved, and also reach out to Guilford, Peter Rood. They ended up doing theirs on their own as well. I will say this is going to take a little time. I've never done it before, but I do have some information from different committees already. Putney Mutual Aid, Conservation Commission, and Wilson Wetlands. And I'm going to reach out to the Planning Commission too to see if I can seek some guidance from them. But I'm nervous about not having this plan in place, because if we had like a disaster, if it was rain related or whatever, we wouldn't be able to get any funding for the damages.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing too, Westminster, when I spoke to Russ this morning, he said he got an extension on his because his is expired as well. And the state gave, or Vermont Emergency Management, because that's who it goes through, they gave him an extension. So I am going to reach back out to Stephanie Smith at VEM and ask if we can have one.
Yeah, especially as we come into thunderstorm/hurricane season.
Right.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
First, another excellent discussion of a public issue. I would simply add, based on experience I had in another town quite a few years ago now, that our legislative delegation be informed about this. In the situation that I alluded to, a state senator got the problem solved, because experienced members of our legislative delegation, of which we have 3 at the moment, know all kinds of people and all kinds of ways to get things done, of which we are not necessarily aware because we don't do the job they do. So if you ask, no disrespect to Ms. Boslin, but simply she is she's in her first term, and of course Senator White and Senator Balint, who is the pro tem of the Senate.
Yeah.
These people can get things done, and you never know. If as my mother used to say, if you don't ask, you won't get it.
Correct.
It's a good point. Thank you. The other thing I was going to say, and I've I won't include your name in this list, Mr. Fairman, but I'm guessing there are some people around town who would have surprisingly valuable abilities to help you with this if we were
Right.
to ask some of them. So, if you think about that, Karen, and there's anybody, you could ask, or you could ask us to ask if there's anybody obvious who might be helpful.
Yep. So I'll keep you posted on how this is gonna move forward.
Sounds good.
Okay. So I also wanted to comment that I attended a 2-day Vermont Town and City Management Association conference last week. And in that 2 days, Leading Equitable Communities was a presentation done by a woman from North Fork, Virginia, and I was intrigued with what she had to offer. So I shared it with the select board, and I know you have a hard copy, Josh.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they take a
You
different
just did it
view.
this morning, I think, didn't you, Karen?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I sent it out.
We're getting a little feedback from a caller one. If caller one could mute themselves, please. It would also be great if they could identify themselves.
Hey, who's on the phone? Oh, they're gone. All right. So I did share this with the board because I was impressed with the way they structured their priorities, and it's around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And granted that the city of North Fork, Virginia is a
Little bigger.
yeah. So it's like 243,000 people for their population, and they have 4,200 employees in the city.
Wow.
So, but I think there might be some valuable information in here for the town of Putney to consider. Like their priorities are outreach and neighborhood engagement, inclusive economic growth, planning and infrastructure, human resources and workforce development. But they go beyond that. And, it's not only just with town government, it's the entire community. And they look at everyone. So I think it's really, I was intrigued with this, and I hope maybe some of this will be used for what we're doing with equity and inclusion, but it could be a good starting place. The other thing too is there are a couple books in here, for possibly the book club to take a look at. But I did gain a lot of knowledge out of that one presentation.
Good.
The next item, the American Rescue Plan Act. So there was a presentation on that, and then I was in 2 meetings this week regarding this money. It has not passed through the House and the Senate yet, and everybody is just kind of like jonesing and trying to get an earmark for this or that. And I have a 150-page document to read through, and it gives the guidelines, what the money can be used for. There are restrictions, limitations, and certain criteria for this money. It has to be spent and used on certain things. So as we evolve, as this evolves, and if it does pass, we've already been told that city managers, town administrators will have quite a bit of work to do. So
we would expect a full summary and report by tomorrow morning.
in June. So
Maybe one
John, They said sometime in June, we're gonna know more about the specifics for this money, so. We also need to think outside of the box and engage the community for long-term planning. And with the Planning Commission doing an update on the town plan, you know, the timing of all of this is like, it couldn't be any better for the town of Putney to look at other things and see what our needs are here in Putney and how are we gonna, you know, get past COVID and support, you know, our economic development and housing. Affordable housing is one, education is another, nonprofits. Different towns are going to be doing different things, but some of the money can be used for rehabbing vacant homes, you know, to create affordable housing. There's all kinds of different ideas. So I'm trying to keep an open mind and see what's, you know, what could work here in Putney, but I'm gonna need a lot of help too. And we're gonna have to do a lot of listening.
Seems to me, and you know, I know we have trouble filling some of our slots, but it might be a good place to think about an ad hoc committee to appoint some folks to help you with that, Karen. And we'd have to be thoughtful about who we appointed, but you know, that's the kind of thing that there are certainly people in town who are, you know, particularly for a relatively short-term thing, to be able to say, hey, can you help us think through this? We might be able to find some folks who would be interested. So, you know, the other thing that we haven't done yet in this select board session, and we should do maybe in one of our sort of first meetings back in person, is to really think about some select board goals and objectives, and that the overlap between that and this could be useful for us to think about. So, because I think we have all seen that, you know, I mean, maybe, for example, real estate in this area might just be a spike right now because of COVID, but I'm not sure it is. And I think we're going to see, regardless, whether it's in the next 3 years or in the next 30 years, we're going to see a lot of change, and we should be as thoughtful about that as we can. So.
Yeah. So broadband is another thing that, you know, and we've been talking about it, and you know, all of these elements are going to be a factor.
Part of the equation. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I just wanted to update you on that, and I'll keep you updated too as this develops. All right.
Good. Well, thank you for putting that time into that.
Yeah, no problem. So Windham County Sheriff Animal Control Officer status. So Westminster had their town meeting on Saturday. Their budget passed. It looks like a regional animal control officer is going to move forward. It should begin around July 1st. So this is good. There's been some changes too in the state. So there's a new bill out, H41. It removes the health officer from investigating animal cruelty cases. So the town will have to designate someone. And we spoke about having Ashley, the new animal control officer for the sheriff's department, be that person. So I don't have a whole lot of information on that. And Mark Anderson, Sheriff Mark Anderson, will be meeting with us again and giving us more information. So he'll also do some sort of resolution, you know, to the fact. So it's all it's consistent with each town for the boards to sign off on. All right. Let's see, bids for highway paving. I'm working with Brian. We should have those bids out tomorrow to contractors. So Hickory Ridge, he's planning on having that done by June 30th. And there are 3 other sections in town. Priest Drive is one, East Putney Brook, and Houghton Road. So it's just the tarred sections, so where they intersect with like a road. So
Yep.
and those are going to be summer projects, the last 3 I just named. And those will have to be done by October 1st. And those will be in the next fiscal year.
Sorry, you said Priest Drive, Houghton Brook, and which was the other one?
East Putney Brook.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm guessing this is on Brian's radar, but just because it has come up to the select board's attention time and again on Priest Drive, are we keeping an eye on any sort of engineering related to that to make sure our water is going where we want it to be going? Again, I'm sure Brian's paying attention, but just an area that I think we should, just a reminder to him to pay particular attention to that. That having been said, I'm also aware that our roads, to a large part, when a road puts water on a person's property, that's the nature of water flowing downhill. But if there's anything we can do in advance to minimize that, that would be good.
He is going to put drainage over there too. So I don't recall the work that he's requesting. I did type it up yesterday, but I will make sure. I know that's a sensitive area.
Yeah.
And we will notify people when work is going to get done as well.
Sounds good.
So couple more things that are not on my agenda that I just want to run by you. The Lister's office have sent out 156 letters, their change of appraisal and or current use changes. So 156 letters is quite a bit. They didn't get any grievances last year. The meeting is May 26th, so they will schedule any grievances and hear them all that day or the next day, depending on how many they get. But I wanted to inform the board that 156 letters went out in the mail.
What's the date? I didn't catch the date, Karen. What's the date of the?
May 26th.
Thank you.
Are they doing it remotely?
Yes.
And remind me, Karen, do we have a third person in that office, or is it just Doug and Jordy still?
It's still Doug and Jordy. Yeah.
So we need another list here.
We do
Fun.
need another lister.
It's a fun thing to do.
Yep.
It's interesting, and honestly, one other thing I would say about it is, and you're a good example of this, Eileen, it's been a remarkable stepping stone for people. A lot of people have taken an interest in the Lister's office in Putney, and it has developed into something more significant. And I don't know that that's the case for you, but I know it was probably part of that process.
That was exactly what happened.
Yeah, no, and that's been true for several people over the years, in my recollection, that they sort of say, "Wow, this is good. I like doing this," and then it turns into something, and there's a need for it beyond Putney, but there's a need for it in Putney right now. So
Yeah.
The other thing too is, and I don't know when this is going to happen, but when the reappraisal has to be done, having a third person in that office is going to be critical.
well, and given, as you know, as we know, given how real estate prices have been going, the CLA is going to kick in. I'd be amazed if it's not within a year or two. I mean, it's going to almost have to be, you know.
Right. So I guess that's it for now.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
So under other business, I'm just going to equity and inclusion. We had a good meeting last week, sort of broad discussion about the nature of where we're trying to move forward to and what it's going to look like. And I think largely there was agreement that that the resolution contains a lot of the language that we want to work with for coming up with a more specific charge. And then actually Swift had forwarded a charge that I don't recall having seen before, and it was labeled version 3, I think. And so I don't know whether that was something that the Equity and Inclusion Committee had been working on and we had not seen yet, or whether it was an early, Swift implied, I think, that it was an earlier version that wasn't adopted. So I may well have seen it before and just not recall, but we're having another meeting tomorrow morning from 9 to 10:30, and we are gonna, I think, spend some time reviewing that. Also, Eitan, who's been working with us, got a copy of the state's equity impact assessment tool. So we're gonna just review that and see what that means. And also I forwarded around the work that Barra has done, and thank you, Barra, for doing the review and summary of the work done in Keene. And it's very interesting, and Keene has obviously done a good job. It's also very, for me, I was very aware in reading through that information that Keene's ability, you know, can't remember, it's not a board of selectmen, it's council persons, or
alderman, no wait, they not aldermans, I should know.
I think it's, yeah, anyway, but you know, they have direct control over a whole lot more than we do. I mean, they have, you know, they're talking about the schools, which presumably they have more, you know, we have nothing to do with how Putney Central functions, shouldn't.
Right.
You know, they have their own police department, they have their own various different departments that we just don't have. So it's a very different model, but it does give some good, strong background on how other people are approaching this stuff. So, and I know Para put a lot of time into that, and I very much appreciate that. So, but we're moving forward on hopefully coming up with a charge, and it's been pretty clear, as we have discussed in here, you know, that some of that is to get through much of the work that was originally sort of discussed and implied in the original resolution, and working on policy review, et cetera. And we're aware that that's not simply something that the Equity and Inclusion Committee should do and then we adopt it, but that it's part of a bigger picture. And Karen was saying we're going to be doing some greater review of policy work, and that also prompts me to bring up the fact that we have been having some HR, human resources issues that the select board has been spending time on over the last year. And we are currently exploring the possibility of having an outside outfit do some work on that for us. And we have requested some proposals, and Karen will be releasing before too long information about those. But we're seeing that some of the issues that we're working with are more complex than any of us, including Karen, have the training or the resources to manage. And so we're trying to figure out what the best next step for those are. And I just want people to be aware that that is something we're thinking about and looking at, and exactly how that's going to sort of continue from here. We're not clear yet, but we're exploring different possibilities. So, and I think that also, that work obviously would need to have an equity and inclusion lens attached to it, but it also, you know, the equity and inclusion lens, looking at our policy work, they all sort of go hand in hand in, you know, having, and some of the HR firms that might be available to us do that kind of policy review work. And, you know, some of it's pretty straightforward and some of it isn't. So having some people who do that for a living might be quite helpful to us. So people know, something we're thinking about. So is there any other business, other business? All right, I don't see anything in the chat, and I'm not hearing anybody speaking up. So given that, I would entertain a motion to enter executive session under, Karen?
Title I VSA 313A3, the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer or employee, provided that the public body shall make a final decision to hire or appoint public official or employee in an open meeting and shall explain the reasons for its final decision during the open meeting.
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to enter executive session as stated. If there's no further discussion, then I'll just say quickly, I'm assuming, Karen, that we won't be making a decision as a result of this meeting. Is that correct? Or
That is correct.
okay. So for those who want to leave now, our next meeting date is June 2nd at 5:30, same place, same channel. We may, as I referred to earlier, have a brief special meeting early next week, depending on pool bids, if that's necessary. But otherwise, we probably will not make a decision based on the executive session tonight. And BCTV, we will inform you of our end date and any updates about the executive session. So at this time, well, so moved and seconded to enter executive session. All those aye. And friendly invitation for Karen to join us.
Yes.
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 Okay, good. And so we will stop recording at this time and enter executive session. Thank you.
This conference will now be recorded.
All right. So we have exited executive session and we had a variety of discussion related to some personnel questions, and we are not making a decision at this time about anything specific. And so our next meeting will be June 2nd, 2021 at 5:30. And is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay.
Moved and seconded to adjourn unless there's any further discussion. All in favor? Aye. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good
Good
night.
Good night.